The Cloud Village. Part 1. The Gust of Wind. Nathan walked home from work, his shoulders heavy and his feet dragging. The day had been long, like every other day. He worked hard, always running from one task to the next. He barely had time to think, let alone enjoy anything. Tonight, the air felt still and quiet, and for once, Nathan noticed the sky. It was sunset, and the sky was full of soft colors, pinks, oranges, and gold. Nathan stopped for a moment to look. He hadn't done that in years. Pretty, he muttered to himself, though his mind was still full of work thoughts. Bills to pay, emails to send, meetings to prepare for. Then he felt it. A soft breeze brushed against his face. It wasn't cold like the usual evening wind. It was warm, gentle, and light. Nathan blinked. There was something different about this breeze. It made the air feel alive, as if it carried a secret. He stood still, letting the breeze move around him. His coat fluttered slightly and his hair shifted. The breeze grew stronger, swirling around his legs and lifting the corners of his scarf. Nathan smiled faintly. It felt nice. It made him forget, just for a moment, how tired he was. But then, something strange happened. The wind didn't pass by like a normal gust. Instead, it wrapped around him, almost like it was holding him. He felt his feet grow lighter, like he was standing on something soft and airy. "Wait, what's going on?" Nathan said out loud. He looked around, confused. His feet were no longer touching the ground. The wind had lifted him. Slowly, carefully, it was carrying him up into the air. At first, Nathan panicked. "What is this?" he shouted, twisting to try and grab something, anything, but there was nothing to hold on to. Below him, the ground grew smaller and smaller. He could see the tops of trees, the roofs of houses, and tiny cars on the streets. The wind was strong, but it didn't feel rough. It felt steady, almost like it was cradling him. Nathan stopped struggling and tried to calm his breathing. "Okay," he whispered. "Okay, don't fight it, just let it happen." As he floated higher, the sounds of the city faded away. The honking cars, the chatter of people, it was all gone. There was only the wind, soft and steady, and the open sky. Nathan looked up. The higher he went, the more the sky changed. The orange of the sunset melted into soft purples and blues. The air felt warmer too, even though the sun was sinking below the horizon. "Where am I going?" Nathan whispered. He wasn't scared anymore, just curious. The wind wasn't rushing him. It moved slowly, gently guiding him upward. Soon Nathan noticed something amazing. He was passing through layers of clouds. At first they were thin and wispy, brushing against his face like cool mist. But then, the clouds grew thicker, soft and fluffy like cotton. Nathan reached out his hand, and his fingers sank into the cloud, feeling its cool softness. He laughed softly. It was like nothing he had ever felt before. The world below disappeared completely, hidden by the thick white clouds. All Nathan could see now was the endless sky above him. The colors shifted again, from deep blue to pale gold, like the sky was glowing from within. Tiny birds flew past him, their wings flapping slowly as if they were floating on the same magical wind. This is beautiful," Nathan said to himself. He felt lighter, not just in his body but in his mind. The worries that had been weighing him down all day were fading away, carried off by the gentle breeze. After a while, Nathan noticed something ahead. The clouds parted, and a glowing path appeared in the sky. It wasn't made of stone or wood, but it shimmered faintly, like it was made of light. The wind set him down gently onto the path. Nathan took a deep breath and looked around. The path was soft under his feet, almost like walking on a cloud. It stretched forward, winding gently through the air, leading towards something in the distance. Far ahead, Nathan saw shapes rising out of the clouds. At first, he couldn't tell what they were. As he walked slowly along the path, the shapes became clearer. They were small buildings, glowing softly like the clouds around them. The buildings looked like tiny houses, but they shimmered as if they were made of glass or water. "A village," Nathan murmured, his voice full of wonder. "A village in the clouds." The wind swirled around him again, almost like it was nudging him forward. Nathan followed the path, walking carefully toward the glowing village. The air felt calm and warm, and the closer he got, the more he felt a sense of peace. As Nathan stepped closer to the village, the houses began to glow brighter. The light wasn't harsh or blinding, it was soft, like moonlight. He could see gentle shapes moving between the houses. At first he thought they might be people, but as they came closer, he realized they were something else. The shapes were glowing figures, light and airy like the clouds themselves. They moved slowly, gracefully, and their soft light flickered faintly, like fireflies in the night. One of the figures floated toward him, stopping a short distance away. It tilted its head, studying him with calm, curious eyes. Nathan stood still, not sure what to do. Hello?" he said awkwardly. The glowing figure didn't speak, but it raised a hand as if inviting Nathan to come closer. Its light flickered gently, almost like a smile. Nathan hesitated, then took a small step forward. The ground under his feet was steady, even though it looked like he was walking on air. The figure reached out, holding its glowing hand toward him. Nathan slowly reached out too, and their hands touched lightly. The figure's light spread across his hand, warm and soothing. The figure nodded, its movements slow and kind, and turned as if to lead him deeper into the village. Part 2: The Skyward Journey. Nathan followed the glowing figure into the village. The path beneath his feet felt soft, like walking on pillows. He looked around, his eyes wide with wonder. The buildings in the village weren't like anything he had seen before. They were small and round, made of clouds that shimmered with faint colors, blue, pink, and gold. Some houses glowed brighter than others, like they were alive. The air was warm and quiet. There was no noise, no cars, no voices, just a soft hum in the background. It wasn't loud or sharp. It felt more like a gentle song, coming from the clouds themselves. Nathan felt calm, like all his worries were melting away. As Nathan walked deeper into the village, more glowing figures appeared. They moved slowly and gracefully, as if they were floating on air. Their bodies shimmered softly, like they were part of the clouds around them. Nathan couldn't tell if they were smiling, but their lights flickered gently whenever they looked at him, and it made him feel welcome. One of the villagers came closer, holding something in its hands. It was a small bowl made of glowing mist, and inside was something that sparkled faintly. The figure offered it to Nathan, its light flickering warmly. "For me?" Nathan asked softly. He wasn't sure if the figure could understand him, but it nodded slowly. Nathan took the bowl carefully and looked inside. The sparkles in the bowl were tiny drops of light, glowing softly like little stars. He didn't know what to do with it, so he smiled politely and said, "Thank you." The figure stepped back, its light flickering again, and then it floated away. The first figure, the one who had taken his hand earlier, motioned for Nathan to follow. It led him through the winding paths of the village. The houses weren't the only things glowing. There were gardens, too. Flowers made of soft light grew along the edges of the paths, their petals shimmering gently in the warm air. Some of the flowers floated slightly above the ground, moving like they were dancing to an invisible rhythm. Nathan stopped by one of the gardens and reached out to touch a flower. It felt warm and soft under his fingers, like a tiny glowing pillow. "This place is amazing," he whispered to himself. The figure motioned for him to keep walking. Nathan followed, noticing more details as they moved through the village. Small bridges made of light crossed over streams of glowing mist. The streams moved slowly, like rivers, but instead of water, they carried something soft and luminous. "This doesn't feel real," Nathan said aloud, "but it's so beautiful." Soon, the figure led Nathan to the center of the village. Here, the paths opened up into a large, round space. In the middle of the space was something incredible, a giant tree made of glowing clouds. Its branches stretched high into the air, and tiny points of light floated around it, like fireflies. Nathan walked closer, his eyes fixed on the tree. It felt alive, like it was breathing. The air around it was warm, and the soft hum that filled the village seemed to be coming from its branches. "What is this place?" Nathan asked, his voice full of wonder. The figure didn't answer, but it motioned for Nathan to sit down on one of the cloud-like benches near the tree. Nathan sat carefully, surprised at how soft and comfortable the bench felt. He leaned back slightly, letting himself relax for the first time in what felt like years. As Nathan sat quietly, he felt a gentle breeze brush past him. It wasn't like the wind that had carried him to the village. This breeze was softer, almost like a whisper. Nathan closed his eyes and listened. He couldn't hear words, but the breeze seemed to carry a message, something calm and kind, like it was telling him to rest. The glowing figure stood nearby, watching him with its flickering light. It didn't rush him or try to interrupt. It just stayed there, waiting patiently. Nathan opened his eyes and looked around again. He noticed that other glowing figures were sitting near the tree as well. They weren't doing anything. They were just sitting quietly, their lights pulsing gently as if they were breathing in time with the tree. For the first time in years, Nathan felt no rush, no pressure. He wasn't thinking about work, bills, or emails. He was just here, and that felt enough. After a long, peaceful moment, the glowing figure walked over to him and held out its hand again. Nathan hesitated, then placed his hand in the figure's. Its glow spread across his skin, warm and calming. The figure motioned toward the tree, its light flickering in a pattern that almost looked like a question. "You're asking me something," Nathan said softly, "but I don't understand." The figure didn't seem upset. It motioned again, pointing toward the tree, then toward the village around them. Nathan thought for a moment. "Are you asking me why I'm here?" The figure's light pulsed softly. Nathan wasn't sure if that meant yes, but he decided to answer anyway. "I don't know why I'm here," he admitted. "I was just tired. I needed something, but I didn't know what, and then the wind brought me here." The figure tilted its head slightly, its light flickering in a gentle rhythm. Nathan felt like it understood, even if it couldn't speak. He took a deep breath and let himself relax again. Part 3. Exploring the village. Nathan sat near the glowing tree for a while, feeling calm and peaceful. The warm air, the soft hum, and the gentle light of the tree made him forget all the worries he had left behind. He didn't know how long he had been sitting there when the glowing figure gently tugged on his hand. "You want me to follow you?" Nathan asked softly. The figure's light flickered, and Nathan took that as a yes. He stood up slowly, his legs feeling lighter than they ever had. The figure led him away from the tree and back onto one of the soft cloud paths. Nathan noticed the air seemed even warmer now, and the colors around him glowed brighter. The figure led Nathan to a small garden. It was unlike any garden he had seen before. Instead of flowers growing from the ground, the blooms floated in the air, glowing softly. Their petals shimmered with colors that shifted gently as if they were alive. Some flowers were big and round, like glowing suns. Others were tiny and delicate, like stars. Nathan reached out to touch one of the flowers. It felt warm and soft, like the clouds beneath his feet. "These are beautiful," he whispered. The glowing figure picked one of the smaller flowers and handed it to Nathan. The flower felt light in his hand, almost like it wasn't there at all. Its soft glow flickered gently, matching the rhythm of the figure's light. "Thank you," Nathan said, holding the flower carefully. He tucked it into the pocket of his coat, not wanting to lose it. The figure led Nathan further into the village. They passed over a small bridge made of glowing light. Beneath the bridge, a stream of mist flowed like a slow-moving river. It wasn't water, but something softer, almost like liquid air. Tiny points of light floated along the stream, drifting lazily in the current. Nathan leaned over the side of the bridge to watch. "It's like magic," he said quietly. The glowing figure stood beside him, its light flickering softly, as if it was happy to see Nathan's wonder. The stream flowed past other parts of the village, winding between the houses and gardens. Nathan followed the figure along the path, crossing more glowing bridges and stopping to watch the misty stream. Everything felt calm and slow, like the village existed outside of time. As they walked, Nathan noticed more of the glowing figures gathering near one of the houses. The figures moved gracefully, their lights flickering in quiet patterns. They seemed to be talking to each other, though there were no words. Nathan stopped at a distance, unsure if he should get closer. The first figure motioned for him to follow. Nathan stepped carefully onto the cloud path that led to the group of villagers. As he approached, the figures turned toward him, their lights pulsing gently. They didn't seem surprised to see him. Instead, their lights flickered in soft, welcoming patterns. One of the villagers held out its hands, offering Nathan a small object. It looked like a piece of the cloud itself, but it glowed faintly, like the petals of the flower he had been given earlier. "For me," Nathan asked. The figure nodded slowly. Nathan reached out and took the glowing object. It was light and soft in his hands, like holding a piece of a dream. He smiled. "Thank you." Nathan looked around at the villagers. They moved so calmly, so peacefully. They weren't in a hurry. They didn't seem worried or tired. It was the opposite of the busy, noisy life Nathan was used to. "What do you do here?" Nathan asked softly. He didn't expect an answer, but the first figure raised its hand and pointed upward. Nathan followed the direction of the figure's glowing finger. Above them, the sky was filled with soft, fluffy clouds, glowing faintly in the warm light. "You take care of the sky?" Nathan guessed. The figure nodded, its light flickering gently. Nathan looked around at the other villagers and the glowing houses, streams, and flowers. Everything in the village seemed connected, like it all worked together to keep the sky beautiful and balanced. Nathan's chest felt warm. "That's amazing," he said. "You take care of all of this?" The figure nodded again, its light pulsing in a slow, steady rhythm. Nathan felt small in the best way possible, like he was part of something much bigger and more peaceful than he had ever imagined. As Nathan stood quietly, taking it all in, a gentle breeze swept through the village. It wasn't strong or loud. It was soft, like a whisper. Nathan closed his eyes and let the breeze brush past him. It carried with it a feeling he couldn't quite explain. It wasn't a word, but it felt like the wind was telling him something. The figure beside him placed a glowing hand on his arm, its light flickering gently. Nathan opened his eyes and looked at it. "You want me to listen, don't you?" he asked. The figure nodded slowly. Nathan stood still, letting the wind swirl around him. He didn't hear words, but he felt calmer than he had in years. The breeze seemed to say, "Slow down, be still, let go." Nathan smiled faintly. "I think I understand," he said. The figure's light flickered again, and Nathan felt a sense of quiet understanding pass between them. Part 4. Learning the Ways of the Sky. Nathan stayed in the village for what felt like hours. Time didn't seem to work the same way here. The sun didn't move across the sky like it did on Earth. Instead, the light stayed soft and warm, like the perfect moment just before sunset. Nathan didn't mind. For once, he didn't feel the rush of time pushing him forward. The glowing figure that had been guiding him waved its hand gently, motioning for him to follow again. Nathan stood up and brushed off his coat, even though no dirt clung to it. He felt light, almost weightless, as he followed the figure deeper into the village. They came to an open space filled with floating clouds. These clouds were smaller and softer than the ones Nathan had seen before. They hovered low to the ground, each one glowing faintly with a color of its own. Some blue, some pink, and others gold or silver. The glowing figure reached out and touched one of the clouds with its hand. The cloud shifted gently, as though it had been waiting for the touch. Its shape began to change, stretching and folding, until it looked like a small, puffy sculpture. Nathan stepped closer, amazed. "You shaped the clouds?" he asked softly. The figure's light flickered, and Nathan took that as a yes. It motioned for him to try. Nathan hesitated, but then reached out a hand toward one of the small clouds. When his fingers brushed against its soft surface, the cloud quivered slightly, as though it were alive. He carefully pressed his fingers into it, and the cloud began to change. It didn't feel like much effort, but it slowly reshaped under his touch. The glowing figure nodded approvingly. Nathan smiled faintly, feeling a quiet joy. He shaped the cloud into a simple star, its edges soft and rounded. When he stepped back, the star began to float upward, joining the other clouds above. The glowing figure raised its hand, and Nathan watched as the star-shaped cloud drifted higher and higher, eventually becoming part of the sky. The glowing figure led Nathan to another part of the village where the air felt different. The wind here was stronger, swirling gently around them in soft currents. It wasn't loud or wild, it was calm but alive, as if it carried a voice. The figure motioned for Nathan to sit on a low bench made of glowing light. He sat down carefully, letting the wind brush against his face. The figure floated nearby, placing its hands in the air as though feeling the breeze. Nathan watched, curious. "What are you doing?" he asked. The figure turned to him, its light flickering softly, and then motioned for him to try. Nathan raised his hands, feeling the wind on his skin. It swirled gently around him, not pushing or pulling, just moving. At first, Nathan felt silly. The wind was just wind, wasn't it? But as he sat quietly, letting the breeze flow around him, he started to notice something. The wind wasn't random. It seemed to move with purpose, like it was carrying a message. Nathan closed his eyes and listened. The wind didn't speak in words, but it felt like it was telling him something. It was soft and quiet, but the feeling was clear. Be still, let go, move with the rhythm. He opened his eyes and looked at the glowing figure. "I think I understand," he said. The figure's light pulsed gently as if to say, "You're learning." The glowing figure led Nathan to a wide platform at the edge of the village. Here, the clouds were thicker, forming soft shapes that floated just above the ground. Nathan noticed other glowing figures working nearby. They were guiding the clouds, moving them gently with their hands. Some shaped the clouds into large, fluffy forms, while others carefully spread them out, creating thin, wispy patterns. Nathan turned to the figure beside him. "What are they doing?" he asked. The figure pointed to the sky above. Nathan looked up and realized the clouds in the sky matched what the figures were shaping below. Thick, puffy clouds created shade, while the wispy clouds seemed to stretch sunlight across the horizon. "You balance the sky," Nathan said softly. The figure's light flickered in agreement. One of the glowing figures nearby motioned for Nathan to help. He stepped forward nervously, unsure of what to do. The figure handed him a glowing stick, which felt warm and light in his hand. The figure showed him how to use it, gently brushing it against a cloud. The cloud moved smoothly, stretching and shifting under the stick's touch. Nathan tried it himself, carefully shaping a small section of the cloud. It wasn't perfect, but the glowing figures around him didn't seem to mind. They watched patiently, their lights flickering encouragingly. For the next while, Nathan worked with the figures, guiding the clouds and helping to balance the sky. The work was slow and calm, and for the first time in a long time, Nathan felt like he was part of something bigger. The sky felt alive, and every cloud seemed to have a purpose. After they finished shaping the clouds, the glowing figure led Nathan back to the glowing tree in the center of the village. Nathan sat down again, feeling tired but peaceful. The figure placed a hand on his shoulder, its light pulsing softly. Nathan looked up at it, his voice quiet. "Why did you bring me here?" he asked. "What am I supposed to learn?" The figure didn't answer with words, but Nathan felt the breeze pick up around him again. It brushed past him gently, carrying that same quiet message. Be still, let go, move with the rhythm. Nathan closed his eyes, letting the words sink in. He thought about his life below. The rush, the noise, the endless tasks. For the first time, he realized how much he had been missing. He had been so busy trying to keep up that he had forgotten how to slow down and see the beauty around him. The figure's light flickered gently, as though it understood. Nathan opened his eyes and smiled faintly. "Thank you," he said softly. "I think I needed this." The figure nodded slowly, its light pulsing in a steady rhythm. Nathan sat quietly, listening to the hum of the tree and the whisper of the wind, feeling lighter than he had in years. Part 5: A Storm Approaches. Nathan stayed near the glowing tree, enjoying the calmness of the village. Everything here moved so slowly and peacefully. The villagers shaped the clouds, guided the wind, and balanced the sky. It was so different from the world he had left below. There were no loud sounds, no rush, no pressure. He felt like he could stay forever. But then something changed. Nathan looked up and noticed the light in the sky wasn't as soft as before. The warm colors of gold and pink had faded. Now the sky was gray, and thick clouds were gathering in the distance. They were darker than any clouds he had seen before, deep gray with streaks of black, swirling like they were alive. "What's happening?" Nathan asked, turning to the glowing figure beside him. The figure's light flickered quickly, and it pointed toward the horizon where the dark clouds were growing. Other villagers began to gather near the tree, their lights flashing in patterns that seemed urgent. Nathan could tell something was wrong. The wind, which had been soft and gentle all this time, started to shift. It was stronger now, swirling around the village with a low humming sound. It wasn't harsh, but it carried a feeling of warning, like it was telling them to prepare. "Is it a storm?" Nathan asked. The figure nodded, its light pulsing slowly. Nathan followed the villagers as they moved quickly but calmly through the village. They weren't panicked. Instead, they worked together, guiding the clouds and shaping them into new forms. Nathan realized they were building something, thick, strong walls of clouds to protect the village from the coming storm. The glowing figure handed Nathan a soft, glowing stick, the same kind he had used before to shape the clouds. It motioned for him to help. Nathan nodded, gripping the stick tightly. He stood next to one of the villagers, watching how they carefully pushed and pulled the clouds into place. Then he tried it himself, pressing the stick gently against the nearest cloud. It moved under his touch, just like before, but now he worked with more purpose. He helped shape the wall, thickening it and making it stronger. More villagers joined, their lights flickering as they worked together. The wall grew taller and wider, stretching all the way around the village. Nathan glanced up at the sky and saw the dark storm clouds getting closer. The wind was louder now, swirling in strong gusts. Just as the wall was finished, the first drops of rain began to fall. They weren't like normal raindrops. These drops glowed faintly as they fell, lighting up the air with soft flashes of silver. The rain grew heavier, and the sound of it filled the air, like a gentle drumbeat. Nathan stood behind the wall, watching the storm. The dark clouds swirled and twisted, flashes of light streaking through them. At first, he thought it was lightning, but it wasn't sharp or blinding like normal lightning. It was softer, glowing like the light of the villagers. The storm wasn't wild or angry. It was strong, but it felt balanced, like it had its own purpose. Nathan felt a strange calmness as he watched it. The villagers didn't seem scared. They stood quietly behind the wall, their lights flickering in steady rhythms. "It's not here to destroy," Nathan thought. "It's just part of the sky, part of the balance." As the storm passed over the village, Nathan noticed something strange. The dark clouds weren't moving evenly. Some parts were too thick, while others were too thin. The villagers began to move toward the storm, their hands reaching out to guide the clouds. Nathan hesitated, unsure if he should follow. The glowing figure turned to him, its light flickering, and pointed toward the storm. Nathan understood. They needed his help. He stepped carefully through the rain, holding the glowing stick tightly. The figure led him to the edge of the storm, where the clouds were swirling unevenly. Nathan reached out with the stick and pressed it gently against one of the darker clouds. It felt heavy, but it moved slowly under his touch. The figure worked beside him, its light pulsing steadily. Together, they smoothed out the dark clouds, spreading them evenly so the rain fell in softer, lighter drops. Nathan looked around and saw other villagers doing the same. They moved carefully, shaping the storm clouds like they had shaped the clouds of the village. As the storm began to calm, the dark clouds started to fade. The rain slowed to a light drizzle, and the wind softened. Nathan lowered the glowing stick and looked up. The sky, which had been gray and dark, was now filled with soft colors. A rainbow stretched across the horizon, its light blending gently with the glow of the village. The villagers gathered near the tree again. their lights flickering in a peaceful rhythm. Nathan stood among them, his chest rising and falling with slow, steady breaths. He felt calm, like he had helped with something important. The glowing figure placed a hand on his shoulder, its light pulsing softly. Nathan turned to it and smiled faintly. "I think I'm starting to understand," he said. "The storm wasn't bad, it was just part of the sky's balance." The figure nodded, its light flickering in agreement. The villagers began to move back to their houses, their lights glowing softly in the misty air. Nathan stayed near the tree, watching the rainbow as it faded into the clouds. The glowing figure stayed with him, standing quietly by his side. Nathan closed his eyes and let the breeze brush past him. It wasn't loud or strong anymore. It was soft again, carrying that same quiet message: be still, let go, move with the rhythm. He opened his eyes and looked at the glowing figure. "Thank you for showing me this," he said. The figure's light flickered warmly, and Nathan felt a deep sense of peace. Part 6: The Rainbow Garden. After the storm had passed, the sky above the cloud village returned to its soft, glowing colors. Nathan stood near the glowing tree, still holding the stick he had used to shape the storm clouds. The glowing figure beside him motioned for him to follow again, and Nathan, feeling lighter than ever, nodded and stepped forward. "Where are we going now?" Nathan asked softly. The figure didn't speak, but its light flickered gently, as if to say, "You'll see." The figure led Nathan to the edge of the village. Here the paths of glowing clouds became narrower, winding gently into the distance. The air felt cooler, and a faint mist swirled around their feet. Nathan noticed tiny drops of light hanging in the air, like dew suspended in the mist. The glowing figure stepped onto the narrow path, moving with slow, graceful steps. Nathan followed carefully, his footsteps making no sound. The path felt soft under his feet, and the mist seemed to part for them as they walked. They passed under archways made of delicate clouds and crossed tiny bridges over streams of glowing mist. Everything around them shimmered faintly, as though the light was alive. After walking for what felt like a long time, the mist began to clear. Nathan gasped softly as he stepped into an open space unlike anything he had seen before. It was a garden, but not an ordinary one. The rainbow garden stretched out before him, its colors so vivid and soft that it looked like a dream. The ground was covered in tiny glowing flowers, each one shining with its own hue. Some flowers were blue, others pink, and others gold or green. Together, they formed a living rainbow that seemed to ripple gently in the air. Above the flowers, thin ribbons of light floated and swirled like the colors of a real rainbow brought to life. The ribbons moved slowly, twisting and blending into new shades as they danced above the garden. "This is incredible," Nathan whispered. His voice felt too small for the beauty around him. The glowing figure motioned for him to step forward. Nathan moved carefully, afraid to disturb the delicate garden. The air here felt even softer, filled with a faint hum that sounded like music. It wasn't loud or sharp, it was peaceful, like the sound of rain or the rustle of leaves in the wind. The figure led Nathan to the center of the garden, where a large pool of glowing mist shimmered like liquid light. Around the pool, other glowing figures were working. They dipped their hands into the mist and drew out ribbons of color, shaping them carefully and sending them into the air. Nathan watched in amazement. The figures weren't just creating rainbows, they were weaving them, blending colors with slow, patient movements. Each ribbon of light was different, flowing into the air to join the swirling colors above. The figure beside Nathan motioned for him to try. Nathan hesitated. "Me? I don't know how to do that." The figure's light flickered warmly as if to say, "You can." Nathan stepped closer to the pool and knelt beside it. The mist felt warm and soft against his skin, and as he reached out, he saw faint colors ripple beneath the surface. Slowly, he dipped his fingers into the mist. It felt like touching liquid silk. When he lifted his hand, a small ribbon of light followed, glowing softly in shades of blue and green. Nathan stared at it, amazed. "I made this?" The figure nodded, its light flickering with encouragement. Nathan smiled faintly and began to move his hands, shaping the ribbon of light. It wasn't perfect. His movements were clumsy compared to the villagers, but the ribbon flowed gently into the air, joining the others. Nathan worked beside the villagers for what felt like hours, shaping ribbons of light and blending colors. Each time he lifted a ribbon into the air, it felt like he was adding a little piece of himself to the garden. The colors swirled above him, creating a rainbow more beautiful than anything he had ever seen. When the work was done, the glowing figure placed a hand on his shoulder. Its light pulsed softly, and it motioned for Nathan to follow once more. The figure led him to the edge of the garden, where a single flower stood alone. It was unlike the others. It glowed with all the colors of the rainbow, shifting and blending as it swayed gently in the breeze. The figure bent down and carefully picked the flower. It held it out to Nathan, its light flickering warmly. "For me," Nathan asked softly. The figure nodded. Nathan took the flower in his hands. It felt soft and warm, like a tiny piece of the sky. Its colors shifted as he held it, blending into new shades with each movement. "Thank you," he said, his voice filled with emotion. As they left the garden, Nathan looked back one last time. The ribbons of light still swirled above the flowers, blending and twisting into endless colors. He felt a deep sense of peace, as though he had been part of something truly special. The glowing figure walked beside him, its light steady and calm. Nathan held the rainbow flower carefully, its soft glow lighting his path. "I think I understand now," Nathan said quietly. "Everything here is connected. The clouds, the wind, the colors, they all work together." The figure didn't answer, but its light flickered gently, as if it agreed. Nathan felt lighter than ever, as though the garden had lifted some invisible weight from his shoulders. Part 7, The Farewell. Nathan walked back to the village with the glowing figure by his side. The rainbow flower in his hands shifted colors softly, glowing like the rest of the village. He felt calm, but also a little sad. He didn't know why, but he felt like his time here was coming to an end. The villagers were waiting for him near the glowing tree. Their lights flickered gently, like they were welcoming him back. Nathan stood for a moment, looking at them and the peaceful village around him. The air was still warm, the clouds soft under his feet, and the wind carried a gentle hum. "This place feels like home," Nathan said softly. The glowing figure beside him stepped forward and placed a hand on his shoulder. Its light pulsed slowly, like a steady heartbeat. Nathan felt like the figure understood how he felt. One of the villagers stepped closer, holding something in its hands. It was a small piece of cloud, glowing faintly with a soft, white light. The villager handed it to Nathan, placing it gently in his hands. The cloud felt warm and light, like it might float away if he let it go. "For me?" Nathan asked. The villager nodded, its light flickering softly. Nathan held the cloud and looked at it closely. It wasn't just a gift, it felt like a part of the village itself, like it carried the calm and balance he had found here. Another villager stepped forward and motioned toward the edge of the village. Nathan looked in the direction it pointed and saw the soft, glowing path that had brought him here. It stretched out into the distance, leading back through the clouds. "You want me to leave?" Nathan asked, his voice quiet. The glowing figure beside him nodded, its light flickering gently. Nathan's chest tightened. He didn't want to leave, not yet. This place was so peaceful, so perfect. It felt like everything he had ever needed. "But why?" Nathan asked. "I feel so right here." The figure's light pulsed again, slowly and steadily. It motioned toward the flower and the glowing piece of cloud in Nathan's hands, then pointed back toward the path. Nathan stared at the objects he held. "You want me to take this back with me?" he asked. The figure nodded. A soft breeze picked up, swirling gently around Nathan. It wasn't strong or cold. It was warm and light, like the breeze that had carried him here. Nathan closed his eyes and listened. The wind didn't speak, but it carried the same quiet message he had heard before. Be still, let go, move with the rhythm. Nathan opened his eyes and looked at the glowing figure. "You're telling me I need to go back, aren't you?" he asked. The figure's light flickered again, steady and calm. Nathan felt a lump in his throat, but he nodded. "Okay," he said softly, "I'll go." The villagers gathered around him, their lights flickering in a soft, rhythmic pattern. Nathan didn't know if it was a goodbye or a thank you, but it felt comforting. He nodded to them, holding the rainbow flower and the glowing piece of cloud close to his chest. The glowing figure that had guided him from the beginning stepped forward one last time. It placed its hand on Nathan's shoulder, its light pulsing gently. Nathan smiled faintly. "Thank you for everything," he said. The figure stepped back and motioned toward the path. Nathan took a deep breath and began to walk. The path felt as soft as before, but now it seemed longer. Nathan walked slowly, looking back at the village every few steps. The glowing houses, the soft gardens, the tree in the center, they all looked so peaceful, so perfect. He wanted to remember every detail. As Nathan walked farther away, the air began to change. The soft hum of the village faded, replaced by the quiet sound of the breeze. The glowing clouds around him grew thinner, and the path began to slant gently downward. The colors in the sky shifted, turning from soft pinks and golds to deeper blues and grays. Nathan realized he was heading back to the world below. The warm air grew cooler, and the faint mist around him began to disappear. He held the flower and the glowing cloud tightly, afraid they might vanish as he left the village. But their light stayed steady, glowing softly in his hands. Soon Nathan saw the first signs of the ground below. The rooftops of houses, the tops of trees, and the faint lights of street lamps came into view. The wind slowed, and the path beneath his feet faded until he was standing on solid ground again. Nathan looked around. He was back in the world he had left, standing on the same quiet street where his journey had begun. The air here felt heavier, and the soft glow of the village was gone. But when he looked down at his hands, the rainbow flower and the glowing cloud were still there. He smiled faintly, holding them close. The glow wasn't as bright as it had been in the village, but it was still there, warm and steady. Nathan looked up at the sky. The stars were faint, and the clouds above were gray and ordinary. But he felt different. The wind brushed past him, soft and light, carrying a familiar message. Be still. Let go. Move with the rhythm. Nathan walked slowly back toward his home. The flower and the glowing cloud in his hands pulsed faintly with light, but he wondered if anyone else would see it. Was the village real, or had it been a dream, a vivid escape from the rush of his busy life? When he reached his house, Nathan placed the glowing cloud on his desk and set the rainbow flower in a glass jar by his window. The light from both objects filled the room with a soft, calming glow. Nathan sat quietly, thinking about the village, the glowing figures, and the lessons he had learned. Real or not, it had changed him. He smiled softly and whispered, "Thank you," as the wind outside carried its quiet song through the night.